Welcome to Tradutex Portuguese Lessons Podcast. Olá, eu sou a Helena, and on this episode we'll carry on talking about verbs like we did on the previous episodes, but this time I want to talk to you about regular verbs. So far we've just covered irregular verbs, very important ones, ser, estar, ter. They're all really important ones. But it's also important that we know how regular verbs work. So first of all, I want to tell you about the three big groups, the three big conjugations we have in Portuguese. So in Portuguese, when we think about a verb, we think about the infinitive of that verb. In English, the infinitive is the equivalent of the verb form starting with the word to. I'm talking about to have, to be, to do, to go. So if you think about infinitives in English, you always start with the preposition to. We don't do that in Portuguese. For us, it's more about the endings. So we have three endings for verbs that organize all the verbs in the Portuguese language in three big groups. We have verbs ending at AR, or in Portuguese, AR. We have verbs ending on ER, or in Portuguese, ER. And finally, we have the third group, the verbs ending at IR, or in Portuguese, IR. So basically, three big groups, ar, ir. So whether verbs are regular or irregular, we can organize them within one of these three big groups. So today I want to tell you about regular AR verbs. So regulares em AR, ar. So, verbos regulares em AR. And then on other episodes we will explore what happens if the verb is regular of the second group ER, er, or on the third group IR, ir. Let's today focus on the verbs from AR group. So regular AR verbs. Verbos regulares em AR. And to do this we have to pick a first verb to get started. Let's talk about the verb to live. The verb to live is morar. 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 How do we spell it? Let's do it in Portuguese, like as we did on the previous episode. And I remind you, if you still struggle about the names of letters in Portuguese, please, you can listen episode number 4 about the alphabet. Episódio número 4. So how do we spell morar? M-O-R-A-R. Morar. And that means to live. And obviously you've noticed that morar ends at AR. And that makes it this verb part of this first group, this first conjugation of verbs we have in Portuguese. Now, how do I change these endings? And why is it regular? So we consider a regular verb any verb that dropping the ending from the infinitive, in this case if I drop the R bit, the AR, that first part of the verb, that in this particular case are the letters M, O, R, if it's regular, and this one is, you can trust me, we will have these first letters repeated on every person of the verb. And this one is regular in all tenses, not just the present. Of course, today we're going to have a look at the present, but this verb morar, it's regular in all tenses of the Portuguese language, which means that dropping the R, the AR from the infinitive, those first letters, in this case M, O, R, we'll have them repeated all along. So what we need to do, we need to change the endings. And then those endings are valid for, let's say, hundreds of verbs, hundreds of regular verbs. So how do we know if a verb is regular or not? After we study the verb, we know it because we realize that the first part of the verb changes. It's not always the same. Before we know the verb, we actually don't know. We need to study the verbs and understand slowly, little by little, which ones are regular, which ones can we put on the regular group, and which ones we have to do on the irregular group. Okay, so the verb morar for the first person, I live, is eu moro. Remember, you had M-O-R because we dropped the A-R, and now we're adding the first ending I'm going to teach you today, which is just the letter O, and I'm adding the letter O, and that is the ending for the first person for all regular verbs. Actually, this one is really for all regular verbs, including the ER and IR, or in Portuguese, ir, because just the first person they have in common. Okay, so it is O, but I'm reading U, like a double O in English, and I'm stressing the syllable before. So, moro, M-O-R-O, moro. I live, eu moro. Eu moro. Maybe it will help if I put it in a sentence. Let's say that I live in Portugal. So if I live in Portugal, I say eu moro em Portugal. In case you've wondered what was that word before Portugal, is the word em, the equivalent of the English in, and I spell it with E-M. E-M means, is pronounced em, and it means in. So, eu moro em Portugal. I live in Portugal. Again, don't forget that if you want, you can drop the word eu and say just moro em Portugal, because that means exactly the same. It's your choice to have the personal pronoun or not. So that O at the end, that letter O at the end, is the one that we're going to use every time you're conjugating a regular verb and you want to do the eu. Eu moro. For the informal you, tu, we have the ending of as. So don't forget, we've started with morar, and morar ends at ar. We drop that, and now for the eu we add o, and we got moro. And for the informal you, tu, we have as, and we have moras. You live, tu moras. You live in Portugal, tu moras em Portugal, or if you want, just moras em Portugal. It's very important that we stress when we're doing verbs in the present in Portuguese. It's very important that we keep in mind that we need to stress the second to last syllable. So I'm not stressing the ending, I'm stressing exactly the bit of word, the syllable that comes before. Moras. Tu moras em Portugal. So if I want to be more formal, instead of saying tu, I change into the word você. You live in Portugal, but being formal is você mora em Portugal. So I have now another verb form, the verb mora, and instead of having moras, as with a sh at the end, always a mark of the informal you, the tu form. Now I drop that s, and dropping the s, I have the formal you. It's just, the ending is just the letter a, mora. Okay, so far we've done eu moro, tu moras, você mora. Always stressing the second to last syllable, okay? Not the ending, but the second to last. Moro, moras, mora. Now, this same mora, it's also good for he and for she. Although they mean different things, você mora means you live, and he and she are obviously different words, we use the same verb form. So he lives is ele mora. He lives in Portugal. Ele mora em Portugal. She lives. Ela mora. Ela mora em Portugal. We live. How do we go with we live? This is the biggest ending we have. So, picking the infinitive, morar, dropping the R, bitte AR, keeping those first three letters, M, O, R. Now what we have to add is a bit slightly bigger than what we did before. It's an ending with four letters, A, M, O, S. And we live is moramos. Moramos. I repeat the ending we're doing now. A, M, O, S. We live, nós moramos. So we're adding a syllable. Eu, tu, você, ele, ela. We had only two syllables, remember? Moro, moras, mora. But now we have moramos. Because we're adding a syllable, that first O we have on the second letter, instead of saying O, we change into U. So we have moramos. Moramos. We live in Portugal. Nós moramos em Portugal. So that O becomes a U in the beginning. Instead of moro, moras, mora, now we change the stress. The stress is no longer on that mo syllable. We added a syllable, so we had ra, moramos. Our stress is normally the second to last syllable. That's the general rule in Portuguese. So that O becomes a U. We live. Nós moramos. Finally, the last verb form that will be good to say three different things. You, plural you, when we talk to more than one person, talking to a group, or at least two people or more, is vocês. You live is vocês moram. Moram. The stress is now back to mo. We only have two syllables again, and our ending now is am. Moram. To pronounce correctly this ão at the end, we really need to close our lips at the end. Moram. And you finish with your lips closed. But we're not stressing the rão sound. We're stressing the mo before. Moram. Moram. You live, vocês moram. They live, masculine, eles moram. Eles moram. It's good for masculine or for a mixed group of men and women. And finally, elas, the feminine they, elas moram. Elas moram. So they, the ladies, live in Portugal. Elas moram em Portugal. Elas moram em Portugal. Okay, so let's go through the verb again. You can repeat after me. I will give you some time to repeat after me, each one. Don't forget, we're stressing the second to last syllable. It means that all these endings we're learning, we're not stressing them. So, I live, eu moro, tu moras, Você mora. Ele mora. Ela mora. Nós moramos. Vocês moram. Eles moram. Elas moram. So the endings. From the beginning, you have 5 endings to remember for regular verbs in ar. Regular AR verbs or verbos regulares em ar. 5 endings. And they sound like o, as, a, amos, ão. And how do we spell them? O, A-S, A-M-O-S, A-M. How do we pronounce them? U, as, a, amos, ão. Let's just repeat the verb once again to finish. So, repeat after me, please. Eu moro. Tu moras. Você mora. Ele mora. Ela mora. Nós moramos. Vocês moram. Eles moram. Elas moram. Muito obrigada. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Até breve. Tchau.